Right, morning, folks. Welcome. Friday morning, yet again. Groupthink. Good, bad, indifferently. I don't know. Do we think as a group, or do we all think as individuals and put our input into a group? Or does the group give its influence on us? So you better unravel that one for us. I'm not too sure where it takes us.
Right, well, yeah, I guess I don't know about unraveling. Join Trevor Nell's let's confuse and get everybody else to think. But I'm sorry, Edward's not here. I'm guessing it's probably an internet thing, because this is actually his topic. You know, he's fascinated by, well, maybe not fascinated, maybe if I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth, but if I was reading between the lines in this chat, this frustration with groupthink, that people come together and they decide on a way of action, and everybody feels happy with their decision, but actually nobody's owned it. Nothing's going to change. So I think also it also flows out of some of my sort of thinking over the last while, when I think about conspiracy theories and groups of people believing something that seems bizarre, certainly to me, and it seems so difficult to understand how so many people can be so ardent about something that's completely unproven, and yet they are convinced of this. And and just recently I've had an experience of being in a group, and somebody accused the group of groupthink. And as I was reading through again, maybe I'm reading between the lines too much, but actually my interpretation of that was, you are not agreeing with me. So if you don't like what I'm saying, then you as a group are trapped in groupthink. And I am the one that knows the truth. And so I'm sounding very negative about groupthink, whereas on the other hand, I think my best thoughts in a group. I've experienced creativity, I've experienced innovation, I've experienced support, I've experienced challenge. You know, Jasper was talking, I don't know whether it was yesterday or the day before, about when somebody, it doesn't take long for somebody just to have a little bit of new information or a different perspective, and it just clicks something in the brain, and you're in a different place, and suddenly things open up. You can start to see where to go, and that you can't do on your own, because you can only think your own thoughts, and you revolve around those thoughts over and over again. So that's my sort of throwing into the pot, maybe both sides or two sides or many sides of the same question, is how do we maximize the benefits of the group when we're thinking, without falling into this crowd mentality of we follow with what everybody else is saying, without being unique and individual.
Great, thanks, Lee. And I'm absolutely convinced that the Earth is flat. Haven't you seen it on a map? I mean, it's just flat. You know, there's nothing there. I mean, yeah. So yeah, I'm not too sure where those things take us. Yeah. But so I think we better start with Trevor Nell this morning, seeing that he's been avoiding the discussions these last few days. So.
Okay, now listen, in my short time on this planet, I've never found a group that actually thinks correctly. So I just want everyone to know that the masses, which is normally a group of 3, myself plus 2, are almost always wrong. That's my experience. So I'm like Ed. Groupthink is a load of codswallop, and that's the problem with democracy. because you get too many stupid people working together who come up with stupid solutions and suggestions. And by the way, I was thinking, all of those fantastic consultants, advisors, all of those that I watch on the evening news and people turning around and saying, this is how we got to get out of this mess that we're in. They're the same blooming advisors that have advised governments for the last 25 to 30 odd years. This group of blooming professionals and advisors, I think we've got to throw the groups out. It's as simple as that. So no, I think groupthink is a danger to society. And it concerns me if 5 or more Steve Carters get together, and I'm not interested in working with Steve's group. Where's Steve? Okay, it's not here. Don't tell him to actually look in here. Right, so I'm not a fan of groupthink. I have seriously been involved in listed companies. I've been in organizations. I've formed clubs. I've been part of committees, and I have always been the odd one out. I've played pretty good sport. I have never complied to how the team think I should play. And I think I've always been pretty dominant in each one of those teams, but I've never been popular. So groupthink is for people who don't want to upset the status quo, who want to be popular. There's this thing that we have in our society that just does not work at all, and that's the whistleblower. Whistleblowers are the recommendation through everything. Law, ethics, morality says you must go and blow the whistle. Let me tell you, the last thing you should ever do in any organization is blow the whistle, because you are going to be taken out. If you are not tough, do not even blow the whistle. Get out of there quickly and set up your own independent organization where you're a group of one, or maybe you find a couple of disagreeable people that you can sometimes work with in business. But then that's still wrong.
Hail the great dictator, Trivanel. So, all right. So, yeah, okay. So, start Friday morning with a rant. Why not? Keeps life interesting. So, we better go across to Jasper, because I know he feels completely differently to Trevor.
Morning. Are you comparing me and Trevor as the yin and the yang, the opposites, or what? So I must now smooth out all the toes that's been trampled on, and tell people that life is still good. Ignore Trevor, etc., etc.
Group hug, yes, but virtual group hug.
Yeah. Group hug. Okay. So I think the reality is we are social beings, so we will always find a group or somewhere we have that need to belong. So whatever we say about the group, people will find a group, and if they can't find a group, they'll make a group. The first thing that came up in my thinking as Lee introduced the topic is, well, you're always going to be part of a group, because even if it's a group of one, but it's very lonely, because how many times can you disagree with yourself until you're blessed with multiple personalities, and then that becomes a mess. So choose your group. But now I'm thinking of positive groups, and Lee was talking about how she's very creative in a certain group, and I was thinking of how often I would sit in church in that environment, and I would have some breakthrough thoughts without trying to think about that thought on that moment, but because of that almost relaxed atmosphere and be thinking in another kind of mentality, things starts to break through and drop in my spirit. But then I'm also thinking of some totally negative groups, and then I think of our friends with the red clothing, and how they somehow seem to gel together and do things, and they're attracted by anything that's negative and destructive. But then I was thinking a good group is not dictating your thinking. Or let me say it another way. The difference between my one experience in church and versus mass behavior, which then just go on this destruction path, is probably the quality of the people within the group. So it comes back to, is the person trained how to think for himself? Because if you can think for yourself, you can then flush out whatever is not relevant and take what's relevant for you and move on. So maybe what we have is a huge problem of mature thinking. And when I said mature thinking, I said to myself, all right, mature is, how do you define mature thinking? In terms of what? Because as soon as I make a definition, Trevor will shoot it down and someone else will shoot it down. So, but it would be interesting to say, what is your definition of mature thinking, thinking for yourself? And then even though it's groups, in the end, real change for good or bad doesn't happen with it doesn't start with a group. It starts with one person. And then depending on the mood of the moment, if you can get a right small team around him, it quickly becomes the mood of the team. And I'm thinking of the era of Hitler. He came to power in a vacuum situation when the previous government did not bring economic solutions fast enough to the table. And what he said seemed to be okay for that time. And I'm thinking of how all of a sudden our one South African Elon Musk, people love him and they hate him, but he gets things done and people find he's a maverick, but he's way out there on the curve, wanting to put people in Mars, and the next moment tunneling under the earth, and next moment tackling the battery things. And I think people secretly want to be like him, and they're just happy that there is something like him. But I have a confliction in my mind against, we can't stop groups. Groups will always be, whether it's a group of 2 or 3 or 2,000 and 200,000. But I think Ed's observation is quite right, and Trevor's observation too. Nothing gets solved by a group. Nothing gets solved by a committee. It happens when a serious small group of decision makers, and the small group mustn't be alike. They must totally, complementary, but not alike. Otherwise, nothing gets done. So I think I've said nothing, but I took it a while to say it.
Thanks, Jasper. A very good political speech there. I think we have to put you up for a future position somewhere in a dispensation where a group is operating. And because I'm totally confused after that as well. So I'm not too sure where it all went. But I was a bit surprised to hear that you've had one experience in church. I thought you'd been there a little bit more often than that. But who knows? Who knows where these things come out? So Donovan, let's come across to you next. Donovan, are you with us?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you clearly. Yeah, I was thinking of the principle of the mastermind, whereby, you know, if a group of people come together, they are able to achieve a lot more than the sum of the individuals, or even the individuals on their own. I don't know too much about it, but you know, it's something that sounds interesting, and I'm sure it can give you good results or bad, you know, depending on who's leading or misleading the group. So that's the danger, you know. When you're part of it, you don't have much control in terms of the outcome, in terms of the direction. Yeah, so yeah, that's my take on it. Thanks.
Thanks, Donovan. I think an excellent point there. You know, there's huge power in a mastermind group if you get it right. So I think, you know, we come back to semantics, you know, groupthink being used as a negative, with a negative connotation, perhaps, and you know, maybe the positive element to that is the mastermind. So yeah, interesting points there. So Cecile, let's come across to you next.
Just a sec, I'll be with you in a sec.
Okay, all right. No problem. So Trevor Carty, over to you.
So I think it's important to differentiate between a group and a crowd. So I think one is an individual, two is a group, and more than two is really a crowd. And then what's the objective of the individual, the group, or the crowd? I think those are things that need to be clearly defined. So let's just go to crowd for a moment and come back to group. And let's use COVID, for example. And what is a crowd at the moment in COVID? You know, the limitation there is 50 at a funeral, now 100. The limitation in family gatherings was 6, now it's 10. I like to use golf as an example. In that crowd, most of the people that go to golf actually go there just to get some exercise, get some sunshine, and hopefully see one or two incredible shots. But inside of that crowd, we got a couple of people doing some very interesting stuff, very focused people inside that crowd. There is the caddy, and he has a role. And his role is not just to sling that bag along. His role is to be the mental coach, the distance coach, the strategist in terms of where the player has got to put the ball. And the dynamic in the crowd is always a very interesting one. And I think that's where those red guys, Jasper, they're not exactly sure who they're following, and anyone who gets most destructive quickest is usually the way that they lead their crowd. I think then when you come to group, I think we've got to get a bit biblical there, Jasper. So in the second time I ever went to church, we heard a line saying, when two or more gather and they have a common something, some good stuff can happen. And then I have a look at the Godhead. It's a group of 3, but the reality in that Godhead is each part of the Godhead has an individual role. So I think once you've defined the roles, you can only have one Father/God. You can only have one Holy Spirit. You can only have one Jesus. So if you know who's doing what in your group, and maybe some people in a group of 2 have more than one role. But then again, I agree with Trevor Nell. A group of 1 is perfect, because then I am God, I am Jesus, and I am the Holy Spirit, and I just make my own decisions. And I think, however, that being said, I can't be everywhere at the same time like the Godhead. So that's the downfall. I can only have one conversation at a time. I can only, Elon Musk and I were having a chat last week about this new CEO that he's brought in and why he brought her in. And it was so that he could be a maverick. And he didn't have to think about signing checks and where to raise the next money. And so, you know, it depends on what you're trying to get out of your group, whether it's a group of 1, a group of 2, or a crowd. So, you know, when I'm golfing, I just want to beat Trevor Nell, take Jasper's money, and have a cold beer at the end of the day. Yeah, it's a great Friday topic.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, it's I think a good analogy. In the group has a purpose. It depends how it's led, I suppose. Yeah, that's possibly a topic for another discussion, Lee, at some point. But Cecile, are you ready? Are you with us? Better grab Cecile while she's not multitasking, Mpumalelo, so you just have to wait a moment.
Yeah, I was just kind of naked when you called me, so it wouldn't be good. I just thought, okay, I'll quickly change when it's not my turn, and it was my turn. I don't really like groupthink either, and what I do try and do, and if I analyze my life, if I have to be in a group, I always try and be one of the leaders in the group, because then you can influence people better, and then you can influence the group in the way that you want the group kind of to go. But in the same thing that Trevor said about if you want to rat on things that are going wrong, I've also experienced those things. Even if it's the perfect 120% truth, boy, you are being alienated the minute you expose that nonsense, whether it's a small thing or a big thing. So yeah, so I'm cautious of groups and actually talking out of a group, because I've been burnt a few times in my life. Yes, I also find it fascinating how people change when they are in a group. They almost, the minute they enter the group, they can't think for themselves. They want the leaders of the group to think for them, and then they don't want to be accountable to any of the thoughts that they have. They people would sit quiet. People that are normally opinionated would get into a group and would not say one word. Maybe they've learned better than me that if you are outspoken, you get alienated. So maybe they are clever in that way, because I've been in groups where people are fantastic as individuals, but the minute they get into that group, they are like sheep that just follow all the other sheep. It is the most fascinating thing. Then often Sven and I would come out of the meeting and we would say, why this is his level of expertise. He's the expert in this specific case. Why didn't he say one thing? But probably because he knows when you say too much, you get chopped down, and he's like not one of the people like Trevor and me that don't mind being unpopular and alienated. So yeah, so I find group things fascinating, but I try to stay away from them. After my corporate life 100 years ago, I am a group of one. Sorry, I have a PA, but she has to do what I say.
Hey, thanks, Cecile. Right, Pumalela, let's get across to you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I guess yesterday when I heard the topic, I just tried spending some time figuring out what the definition of groupthink is. But what I came down to eventually is that I think, as we've said before, the intent of the groupthink will probably determine whether it's a good thing at that moment or not a good thing. But also I then had a thought that says probably the question should be more, how do we learn to understand when groupthink is great and when groupthink is not great? In the experiences that I've had, if you take groupthink in a brainstorming session, you get a synergy that you otherwise would not get with individual thinking. It's a magic that's impossible with one person. More possible because there's a variety of people throwing things in the pot, igniting thoughts that you didn't have before, and you find that your mind expands and it goes to places you did not think of. And so for me, it said groupthink in that context with an idea of getting to a synergy is probably the best context to have groupthink. But at the same time, I thought probably groupthink is great when everyone finds expression. You take wisdoms, for instance. We're different in many ways than one. We're different from a Trevor, from a Cecile, but 8 o'clock in the morning, we still come and we chat to each other and we find expression in our differences, right? It's still part of a group. It's still part of this wisdom thing. It does mean at the end of the day, there's something that pulls us together. And that thing is wisdom. That's where the group part of it comes. But within this group, we all find expression. And I think that's where probably the context of groupthink is bad, is when the individual has a sense that they cannot find expression. But I guess also groupthink calls for a certain level of maturity, a maturity that says, even if Trevor is different from me and says things that are different from me, I have to find the maturity in me to still see him as part and parcel of the group that I am part of. So for me, they both have their value. To try and maximize them so that we get the best out of the two, we probably have to understand the context at which they best can work, understanding that you can have a group, but the strength of it will come from having individual strong thinking, finding expression within a group. Where I tend to disagree with just individual thinking continuously is that what then tends to happen is you have expectation of people that you yourself wouldn't want to meet. For instance, I don't want somebody else to think for me, but I want to think for them. And that for me is I find difficult to accept. If I am to give my opinion and expect people to listen to it, I have to do the same. Give room for others to express their opinion and see whether putting them together does lead to synergy. If it doesn't lead to synergy, but leads to destruction of each member, as you would have with conspiracy theories, then it's a problem. So it's about learning when does it work, when does it not work, and using it. That's why we are wise people. We always understand when to use something, when not to use something. Hey, I'm leaving it there today.
Thanks, Mpumelelo. Some great thoughts and inputs there again. Yeah, it's for me, it's a very interesting, and I think it comes down to two elements that have been touched on and you spoke about again, Mpumelelo, there. And the first is leadership, and the second is maturity. So any group needs a good leader. And if everybody in that group are good leaders and they all mature, then you're probably going to get some excellent results out of it. Because you get an environment where people can speak freely, can voice their opinions freely without feeling sensitive about responses that they might get. And I think that's where it breaks down when egos start getting in the way, and people feel fragile or insecure about their position within an environment, and that allows it to spiral downwards, as you were saying, when it breaks down. But when you've got a great environment with great people and some strong leadership, I think you have a real chance of getting some fantastic results out of it. So yeah, I think, and that comes back to Donovan's point about the mastermind, and I think that that's an incredibly powerful concept. I think if you can get it right, so something that's definitely, I think, worth working on. Yeah, Mpumelelo, I think you always sound passionate, but passionate with lots of thought behind it. So I don't have a problem with that. I've seen a Zippo who's been struggling with her internet connection again, says she thinks groupthink is dangerous, yet in some situations it's necessary. At the same time, I also believe it's important for groups to be of the same mind in order to achieve its objectives. Yeah, it's interesting, that for me is the real challenge, is defining that line between being of the same mind and simply compliant, because disagreement, diversity, and discussion around that can often bring some very interesting results. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Ali, back over to you to wrap up the morning and tell us what we can ponder on this weekend for Monday.
Well, I absolutely love the wisdom that's been shared today. Groupthink is terrible. Groupthink is amazing. We need individuals. We need the group. So I'm so glad that we have come to a helpful conclusion about groupthink and individuals, and but I think what it does stimulate for me is, how do we make the best of the group? How do we benefit, and how do we create a group that is going to have the elements of the good things that we're wanting to talk about? So, what are the, I guess, what are the characteristics, but also, what does it take what does it take to be part of and to be in a group that works like that? So, and I'm being interrupted by somebody in the group, which I will allow for the moment.
Who interrupted you, Lee? All right, so I just think it's the wrong question. And I think it's the wrong question that's asked all the time. But I don't want to criticize the leader of the group, in heaven forbid, in any way. Okay, and let me tell you why I think the question is framed incorrectly. Because I think people are looking internally inside organizations to say, how do we work with all these people to come up with the great ideas? And they forget one important thing, that if the only ideas that are important are what the consumers will buy out there. So it doesn't matter what organization you are. Go and find out what the consumers want and have the internal group come up with the ideas that will give the consumers what they want. Everything else is wrong. Therein is the law. It's on page 1 of my book on throw groupthink down the drain. Think of the consumer first, find out what they want and build your organization from there. And I think too many people get jobs, they go into organizations and they say, well, how can I change the culture from within? No, start your own blooming business and find out how difficult it is to actually satisfy what the consumer wants without any money behind you. Cecile and I agree. We're in a group of 1 and I'm the leader. Cecile, I'll have 2 sugars in my coffee, please. No, do not agree.
Well, I think I made an absolutely brilliant question, because look at the response I got. I got passion and interest and thinking. So
Am I being manipulated?
Maybe, and I hear what Trevor's saying. I'm not going to change my question. I'm going to ask it in this way. How do we capitalize on the benefits of thinking together? And I specifically use the word capitalize there to appease Trevor. And and I still feel like we're talking about what the benefits of a group. So how do we capitalize on thinking together? That is the question for Monday, and look forward to that. And I'm hoping Edward can join us then and add his words and thoughts into. So that's, let's think about that for the weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Lee. Fantastic. Yeah, get your telepathy working, everybody, so we can connect virtually over the weekend on your group think, wire ourselves in. Have a great one. And yeah, we'll see you Monday morning. Go well. Cheers.